Now we are going to study the geometry of 2D shapes. Now you know what 2D means. It means two-dimensional. However, we also look at 3D these days. You should be familiar with that. When you go watch a movie, it is usually two-dimensional, or three-dimensional, 3D. And normally when it is 3D, they give you the glasses to use, so that you are able to observe the movie in three-dimensional shapes. So now we are studying the geometry of two-dimensional shapes. Now, what aspects of two-dimensional shapes are we going to study? Let us now look at the first one. We are going to study the geometry of triangles. At this stage, I would like to point out our progression in geometry. Please observe the progression. Do not see geometry in watertight compartments. You got to see it as a flow. So when we started with geometry, we started with a dot, then we spoke about array, then line segments, and then a line. We then looked at more than one line, where we took two lines and they were intersecting. Then we had two parallel lines cut by a transversal, so we made it three lines. Now we are looking at triangles. What are triangles? Triangles are three lines, but they enclose a space to form a triangle. So watch how the progressions of lines are moving. So there are three lines to form a triangle. What are we going to study with the triangle? We are looking at the types of triangles. There are various different types of triangles. We are also going to look at the properties of those different types of triangles. Okay, now, what's the next 2D shape that we are going to study? We are going to study the geometry of quadrilaterals. Now here is your four-sided figure. Triangles, tri, means three, and quadrilaterals, quad, means four. So this is a four-sided figure, which means it has four lines that enclose a space. Now we are talking about lines. So we are just progressing with the number of lines. We are then turning those lines to close a space up, to form shapes. So now, we have the triangle, and we have the quadrilateral. What are we going to study under quadrilateral? We are going to study types of quadrilaterals. Again, there are various different types of quadrilaterals. We are then going to look at the definition of these different types of quadrilaterals. Finally, we are going to look at the properties of all those quadrilaterals that we are studying. The next aspect of 2D shapes that we are going to look at is congruent shapes. Remember, shapes happen when lines close a space. When three lines close a space, it is a triangle. When four lines close a space, it's a quadrilateral. You can also get 5, 6 lines, and so on, enclosing a space to make a shape. However, we are only studying these for now. Congruent shapes mean that it can be shapes that are triangles, and shapes that are quadrilateral or any other space that is enclosed by any number of lines. We are looking at the congruency of shapes, so we are looking at them as congruent shapes. So we are taking two shapes and comparing them. We are then looking at similar shapes. Here, we are doing the same thing we did with congruent shapes, but now, we are looking at the similarity of the shape. And these are concepts that you will understand in more detail, as we go deeper into the section on geometry and shapes. Okay, now remember, we are studying geometry of 2D shapes, but we are now looking at triangles. So we are looking at the geometry of the 2D shape, and we are looking at the triangles. Just to recap, triangles are three lines enclosing a space, so that forms a triangle. Now we are going to look at the types of triangles. Remember, in our flow diagram, we have triangles, types of triangles, and then we have properties. So we are covering types of triangles and properties simultaneously in this diagram. or in this table. Okay, let's look at the names of the triangle. Look at the visual picture of the triangle, and what is the identifying property that makes it that kind of triangle? Now let's look at the first one. The first one is called an acute angle triangle. Now how do you identify if a triangle is acute? Firstly, look at that picture and visualize what a triangle is. Can you see that you have three sides? AB, BC, and CA are closing a space. That is why that is a triangle. Although, we do have a special name for that triangle. It is called an acute angle triangle. Now why is the triangle acute? Look at the angles determine it. When we look at this angle, it is 60 degrees, that is 50 degrees, and that is 70 degrees. What do you notice about all the angles? All the angles are less than 90 degrees. That's what makes it an acute angle triangle. So their identifying property is, all angles are less than 90 degrees. All the angles of the triangle, by all we mean three, there can only be three angles in a triangle. So if those three angles are less than 90, then it is called an acute angle triangle. Let us now look at the next one. Now we have a right-angled triangle. And you notice that there is a mark here, and the symbol indicates that it is 90 degrees. So this indicates that